Greetings, today from the country in isolation still. I'm sorry you can only see my head. It's taken me over 45 minutes to figure out how to position this screen so that we can talk about Shell and Stone today. The subject is of all importance. How I've come to it was over the last few weeks being in isolation. I began to study, hey Zerby family, good to see you. I began to study the influence of Greek philosophy on biblical narrative and started with research on David and Jonathan and other stories in the Old Testament as well as the New Testament and Jesus' words. And I've come up to some conclusions which I feel are really relevant for our day. One of the things missing in our world today is incarnational connection, especially right now. And I thought it would be a fitting study to follow. Out of that, finding things that I would explain in my house or at the church or what I'm doing, follow this. Yesterday and the day before, I was walking up as I do at the end of the day, and there's a road up here where some friends live, and I realized last night that their house, I just passed their house and looked up, and as I looked up, the fields of green grass were blowing in the wind. It was so beautiful. I was trying to think of the psalm, I couldn't think of it, about the trees of the field clapping their hands. I remember experiencing that transcendent observation in nature when we were, with the Omers, were driving in Ireland before Rachel was born, where I began to explore the numinous, and a lot that is regarding Celtic spirituality. I later discovered I am Celtic and that my birth family is Welsh. I descend from the Welsh kings. Anyway, it is what it is, so it doesn't mean much, but kind of fun. So today I'm going to talk about the painting behind my head, and sorry for the awkward position. Technology trumps comfort, elegance, and detail. I'm having ice water instead of tea today. Tomorrow, I hope to broadcast from my porch and begin to explore the sacred space across the street, which this is part of. But today, I'm going to explore the garden as sacred space as it's articulated through Wordsworth. I'm going to switch to the painting, and then you can look at it for a while I explain how this discussion started happening. Hope I don't tumble something here. I've got my camera on the ladder. There we go. There's the painting. It's by William Swett Charnock, who is a fellow Quaker, and we showed it at the gallery in 1981. It was done at the time of Twyla's portrait, which you've seen behind me at tea time in the dining room. This is based on a poem by Wordsworth and some of the images that are in it called Shell and Stone. You can look it up, just look up Shell and Stone and you'll Google, you can find all kinds of things about it. This is important for a couple of reasons. 2 days ago I was asking God to show me how my hello, Austin. How my calling should continue. We are waiting for an interim rector at Trinity Episcopal Church in Upperville, and I was appointed through the rector that retired as artist in residence. And I bring both Rob Vance, the retired priest, and then the next interim, Ed Miller, encouraged me, and I put on a series of 3 arts and spirituality weekends, including one, the premiere of a book, the signing of a book by Linda Holden called The Gardens of Bunny Mellon. It's all about her gardens, and in the book is a whole chapter on the interior of the church, which she created according to her sensibilities to the imagination and the creation of endless saints in Wales and Ireland and Celtic nations. So that's kind of the tradition from where I'm working from. And so what started out as a prayer 2 days ago in front of this same house up on the hill last night, it was partially answered and part of what we're doing now. I announced yesterday that today, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this week and the end of next week, during Holy Week, we will focus on aesthetics and spirituality, and hopefully next week, with their permission, I will be giving you a tour of the building that Mrs. Mellon built, just giving you a detail each day, about 10-15 minutes of important symbolic significance within the sanctuary. It's an amazing place. The church is normally open 24 hours for anyone to come in. There's a strong congregation that worships here, and my calling has been to be part of outreach and to articulate the arts and embellish what is being preached from the pulpit. That's my calling, and it's been renewed. And what happened yesterday, as I was walking by and noticing the waves of grass, I thought of the psalm and looked up and realized that my friends, both of whom are mentors, their house their house is on the top of the hill, and it faces approximately the way the church faces, with windows to the east and to the west. And in the morning, the sun rises in the east, just like the altar in the church, and the sun rises in the west at night. And they have a 360-degree view. It is just breathtaking, even breathtaking from the bottom of the hill. Well, as I was walking along, I found, 2 nights ago, I found the stone that I've been showing you and the dried flowers, which represented to me the fragility of life right now, especially in New York City. My daughter, Rachel, is in New York City and a bit overwhelmed. There was a refrigerated body truck parked across the street from her house 2 days ago, and 4 went by. It's peaking, and the peak is coming here very soon. So please wear your masks and wear gloves. And I appreciate your prayers for everyone, all of us. This time of forced isolation is an interesting way to spend Lent, and is kind of a secular forcing of people from denial and distracting ourselves. I just realized, as a friend of mine shared last night, it's unbelievable how much time it takes to do everything when you can't distract yourself by going out and buying something or distracting yourself with activities. So I hope that we all are beginning to settle down. I am glad for my Quaker background, however, I will never forgive them for substituting potluck dinners for the Eucharist, but that's another story. So we'll go on. I'll just take the best and leave the rest in the past. That was my adopted family's tradition, and not mine now. So today we're looking at Shell and Stone. This is based on a poem by William Wordsworth. And he's diving into classical philosophy. This is a good example of where the classical and the Jewish come together. I've been studying the influence of Philo and Josephus on the early church and the Old Testament, and a lot of translations of things in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament are based on their translations, which are basically Platonic. And one of the big strains, I know this is all highfalutin terms, I hope you can bear with me because I'll go back to sillier things later, but not during Holy Week. One of the big problems of the church is Gnosticism, that the material, concrete, the body are not real. They are only containers of something spiritual, which is not touchable. The best reading of that would be that your body is like a piece of paper or a card being shoved into an envelope. It's in the envelope. The envelope is a spirituality. It's a non-mystical spirituality. Well, Wordsworth takes this on, and it involves technology now, even way beyond what he knew at the time. And he was trying to not counteract the Romantic period, but trying to come to terms with reason and with scientific investigation and the numinous and poetry. So I will begin. In Socrates, we find that aesthetics were always, aesthetics itself were up to the gods. Socrates said God talks to you as if you were intelligent, as you are intelligent. Sorry about that. Why did, in a way, well, Ruskin didn't do this exactly, but Wordsworth did, and Ruskin followed somewhat with him. Why attack writing? And according to what he bases on Socrates and the philosophers, you attack writing because it attempts to transcend the fear of death. Socrates addressed men as who would be warriors. Montaigne later said, to philosophize is to learn how to die. Going on, writing equals fixed meaning. Petrified, to memorialize content, but not only content, but the self. Socrates appeals to the God of wisdom, an alternate path to transcendence. This path to transcendence is in opposition to technology, in opposition to which binds us together and to the earth. Wordsworth therefore looked to nature as a new form of learning, and I just wanted to tell you what's coming out of this. We're hoping to put together a symposium online with my good friend, and he was my intern for a couple of years, Josh King, who's professor at Baylor, graduated from Harvard and is a specialist in Wordsworth and poetry. He's writing a new book on aesthetics. I don't know the name of it, but exactly it has to do with ecology, technology and ecology. And there's one chapter, I was so excited because his name came into my mind, and as other times this happens, it was great timing because of God's intervention. He is doing a whole chapter on Wordsworth's gardens and ecology and the connection between poetry and ecology, especially Wordsworth. There's a famous quote by Wordsworth, and I'm almost done, but it's something you need to think about. Now, in this painting, there's a beautiful white shell. There is another shell here, one up here, and then it's on a column of stone and on a base of marble. In the background is the niche and the cover of you can maybe bring it up closer, of the wall. I'm afraid I may knock this thing down. There's a glass vase on top with water in it and shells, and there's a moth, and there's a salamander on the outside. And that symbolizes the four elements: earth, water, fire, and air. And that's what Wordsworth bases his poetry on this particular thing. Here's what Wordsworth said: with such a book before our eyes, meaning nature. He quoted this as he was looking at Mont Blanc. I don't know if any of you have seen Mont Blanc, but you need to look it up. I looked it up because recovery center that I'm involved in, along with my fellow business partner, it's called Mud in Your Eye, which I'll explain tomorrow, which has come out of my living out here. We're supplying landscape, interior gardens, hanging gardens inside, and some sculpture for therapy for opiate drug rehabilitation in a Mountaineer Recovery Center over in West Virginia. Excuse me, let me just mess my notes up here. So, referring to nature, what began as an investigation of Greek philosophy and translations of the Bible now is turning to nature. That's where I find myself. In the Arab dream, he talks about, and I believe it prophetic in terms of what we are talking about. The warrior in the classic writing, the warrior is found in a deluge, and in the end he saves. He's a deluge of fire, water, and apocalypse. So that's the symbol of all these elements in the painting. The shell represents simply poetry, and the stone represents simply geometry or science. That's what Wordsworth struggled with. And I think, in a sense, it's really a blast of memory and something of worth for us to consider in our isolation today. There's this Arab dream that he describes, and and he asks the question, why did the Arabs save the stone and shell when the deluge overtook him? It's because when these are separated, we continue in a point of dis-ease, and we are left groping and questioning. And the end of the question is, did God save the shell and stone? I'd like to share with you Psalm 135, 16, 17. You can look it up. But also Proverbs 9, 10, which the scriptures say, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. So I decided to look that up. And wisdom, according to the scriptures, equals good judgment. Fear is inspired by love, not terror. And it refers simply, that's what Jesus was referring to when he was asked what are the two greatest laws. It's to love thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind and spirit, and thy neighbor as thyself. Those are what wisdom is and fear of God means. It's sort of like even with Wordsworth, contrast between books and nature. It's an example a good example of knowledge is looking at a tomato and being able to say that it's a botanical fruit. You completely miss its essence and you don't get to taste it, which is a lot of fun. Wisdom, in the scriptural sense, means to depart from evil. And fear, awe, and delight. Awe and delight are the features of fearing God rather than terror. Much more than the Mosaic law. And it releases us through awe and delivers us from fear of not doing the right thing. The awe of God guarantees that he will deliver us from evil and will give us the ability to do what is right and wise. That's the end of today's lesson, and I hope it wasn't too dense. We'll continue tomorrow on the porch with a more civilized tea and give you the view of what I call, including the bridge at Plimfeather Hallows. This post will be on Facebook Live under my name, and it's also, all of them are being put now on YouTube under Glimfeather, Glymfeather Hall. You can find either one of them there and all of the other ones. So have a good evening, and I will see you tonight. Tonight at 7 I'll be reading another chapter of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And then next week we'll be broadcasting, hopefully if we get it arranged with camera and permission and everything, to detail some of the glorious details of the surroundings here at the church. Thank you all for listening in and watching. I look forward to seeing you all when everything recovers. And the outdoor chapel and the garden of the church is open for anyone that wants to come in. Everything else is locked down. And down the street, as I said last night, is a wonderful restaurant that you can get carry-out called Hunter's Head. It's one of the best English pubs in the United States. So have a good day and God bless.